And a pleasant good evening to everyone. Welcome to the works. I'm your host, Keith Williams. Thank you so much for tuning in on today. And we have Dr. Candice Seti with us today. Good evening.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
I am doing pretty well, enjoy some nice weather today.
Ah, what a nice break, right?
Yes, it's so I'm in Alabama, so we have what's called bipolar weather.
Lots of extremes.
Sometimes the weather can get kind of schizophrenic.
Uh-huh.
Um, is Here in Alabama at times you can enjoy all four seasons in one day.
Yeah, that's a little bit different than San Diego.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, doctor, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, well, first and foremost, I guess I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. In private practice, I specialize in working with individuals with weight management issues, eating disorders, insomnia, self-sabotage. And I work both one-on-one with people via video, as well as offering all sorts of programs online for people who kind of want to work at their own pace. But those are sort of my specialty areas and the areas generally that I work with people on. Um, and I have, two books in these areas, one on weight management and one on self-sabotage that people can use to kind of guide them through their own process of overcoming some of their issues and moving forward.
So we're going to be talking about those two books,
Great.
as well as some other things about your private practice.
Uh-huh.
But there's one thing I have to ask. According to your profile, it says that you are a former yo-yo dieter. What is a yo-yo diet?
Well, you must not be a yo-yo dieter if you don't know what that is. Because most people who are one know exactly what that is. And the
I
yo-yo
have no
dieting.
idea what it is.
So the yo-yo dieting is basically the idea of being on and off a diet over and over again and kind of gaining and losing that same 20 pounds over and over again. And it's very common in the dieting world that you see, an individual who decides they need to lose weight and they go on a diet and they lose weight and then they go off the diet and they gain the weight back. So what do? They go back on the diet, and this cycle continues, oftentimes for years, sometimes for decades, because people are at a loss for what else to do, right? They think if I want to lose weight, I have to diet, and that's the only answer. So they just keep going on and off a diet over and over and over again. And creating this dependence, creating this self-esteem issue, creating even more difficulties in losing weight as they do it over and over again. And so because I've had that experience myself and I know how difficult and frustrating that can be, I ended up creating my own plan, a non-diet based plan of behavioral and lifestyle changes that I obviously implemented for myself, but that I used to create the backbone of the weight management plan that I use with the individuals that I work with.
So how do you get out of this? So how do you get out of this yo-yo? I mean, I know what a yo-yo is. It just goes up and down, and it
Uh-huh.
seems as it goes up and down.
Yep, yep.
So, I mean, how do you get out of that pattern?
Well, obviously, the first step is you need to identify that it is a pattern, that it is something that you need to change. And, obviously, help, from somebody like myself can be great. But even without that, when you can say, okay, I'm doing this, I'm going back and forth and not really getting anywhere, and I need to make change, then you can start to look at your own behavior and identify exactly what needs to change. And, is it that I have an unhealthy relationship with food? Is it that I'm, surrounded by people that don't support me? Is it that I have a negative self-image that's causing this relationship issue with food? Is it that I have, difficulty with mindful eating or intuitive eating? Is it that I tend to eat at certain times of the day? Is it that I turn to food for emotional reasons, right? So really starting to look at your behavior and look at what's leading you to these problems in the first place can help you identify a plan of action to make change that's not dieting.
So I have to ask the $64,000 question. Does dieting work?
Well, the answer is yes, but short term. That's the problem with dieting, is that it is a temporary fix. I mean, dieting by definition, when you go on a diet, you're going on something that is temporary. And, because it's temporary, it almost always involves some type of restriction, right? It may be low fat, low carb, low dairy, low calorie, low sodium, whatever it may be. And because of this restriction, it's very disconnected from your body, where you're not really either listening to your body's hunger cues, or you're not feeding your body what it's asking for. And with all of this restriction, it becomes a very difficult thing for you to maintain long term. So what happens is we go on a diet, we lose weight, but we can't stay on it long term. So we rebound by going 180 degrees in the other direction. And that's where you see that yo-yo effect. And it's why the long-term success of diets is about 2%, which means in the long term, 98% of diets fail. And that is a very extreme number when you think about it, but it's just what all of us know to do when we want to lose weight. So successful short term, yes. Successful long term, not at all.
So we got a lot of these companies out here that are still keeping up with the diet craze. I
Mm-hmm.
think the most popular one is Weight Watchers, or
Yep.
WW for short. Now, some of these, I don't know if Jenny Craig is still around.
Yep.
That's old school. Then you have Atkins. I mean, of course, I don't like any of their food. It's terrible. Uh, but you also have claims that okay, you can eat whatever you want and still lose weight, or you don't have to exercise
Right.
and still lose weight. What do you think about? What do you think about these claims?
Well, I think they're just that. I think they're just claims. I mean, the reality is if you want to lose weight in a healthy way, you can eat whatever you want, but you have to eat in moderation. You have to have balance in your life, right? You can't sit down and have gallons of ice cream for every meal and expect to lose weight. But that doesn't mean losing weight in a healthy way means you can never have ice cream. You have to be balanced in a way where you allow these things into your life with moderation, so you take the power away from them, right? That's the problem with all of these restrictive diets, is by restricting a certain food or a certain type of food or a certain food group, you give these foods a lot of power over you, and then you lose control when you're around those foods, or when you finally do allow them back into your life. So moderation is really the key to any successful weight management plan.
So, I want to see if you can clear up something here. Now, historical wise, we know that um, what two things. Number one, like in Hollywood, for example,
Hmm.
you have these motion picture producers. They want women
Mhm.
to look a certain way. I say almost like toothpicks, rather.
Mhm.
And they put them on these crazy they put on these crazy diets. I mean, it's some of the things are like really off the wall, and then they end up getting depressed, and things get worse. And then, back in the day, I think up until the 80s, maybe, that you have ordinary people who are not actresses or influencers or what have you. They want to be like these folks in Hollywood to,
Mhm.
look a certain way. It was like a really big thing back then, but so not so much now. It's not really a big thing now as it was, back then, uh, but being obese is still frowned upon,
Hmm.
in society.
Yep.
Unfortunately, they have slapped a phobia
Yeah.
um, suffix behind it, which is crazy because I don't think people really know what a phobia is.
Hmm.
Um, a phobia is like something that you do irrationally. It's like out of the norm.
Right. Correct.
For example, what happens if you like in a really closed space
Hmm.
and
Right.
you therefore
It's
won't feel
irrational fear. Correct.
right. That's claustrophobia.
Hmm.
I've been there a couple of times when I was in the military, when if I get in this gas chamber, it feels like my nose and my throat is closing on me and I'm not
Hmm.
getting any air. So I'm choking and I'm having a panic attack,
Hmm.
you know, uh, because my brain can't handle it. It's like overload, overload, overload. And that's
Uh-huh.
that's 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 how it and that's how the body, react. Now that's a phobia.
Hmm. Yep.
But
Correct.
but now we're seeing that people who are obese and society, they frown upon it, they talk about it, but then they put a phobia labor on it.
Mhm.
Now that part I don't agree with, okay, because no one has an irrational fear of being nobody has an irrational fear of being obese, right?
Mhm.
So why would you put that type of suffix behind it? It's like they're making up their own words and
Correct.
it's out of context.
Yeah.
So your thought on that, Dr. Seti?
Well, it's really, I mean, what you're talking about is weight stigma, really. This stereotyping or discriminating that we do against somebody based on his or her weight. And it's very detrimental. It can affect people in a lot of different ways. I mean, you can see people being denied job opportunities or getting different salaries, and this weight stigma concept can be really troubling. It can drive people to overeat. You even see it in the medical community, where doctors may address weight and not look at any of the underlying factors, and it's hugely problematic because it doesn't solve the problem. And I think you're correct in the sense that it can manifest as a phobia, but it is definitely a stigma. And you were talking
Oh, wait a
about.
minute. I don't agree. No, what I'm saying is that I don't agree that it should be. I don't agree that someone should slap a phobia label on it because
Oh,
it's not.
well, because it's not a phobia. You're right.
It's not a full right.
Yeah, yeah.
I
No,
want to
you're
make
you're
that. I want to
absolutely
make that
correct.
perfectly clear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea of being a phobia, like you just kind of explained, is, we see this a lot where people take these psychological terms and kind of blanketly apply them to different situations or behaviors or personality types, and they're not accurate. And that's a really good example of yet another one, right?
Yeah, I
Where.
mean, exactly. And then, when you try to, explain that, they're getting upset with you. I was like, but you using that suffix out of context.
Well, not just out of context, but just completely inappropriately, right? I mean, it's not like we talked about. I mean, phobias are irrational fear, and that's not at all what we're talking about in this circumstance.
Exactly. So I mean, I guess it really boils down to education.
And most of these things boil down to education, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just had to throw that out there because that's becoming like, almost as popular as you turn on the TV and
Mhm.
watch the news. You
Yep.
always hear about, especially on social media. They call it fat phobia, they call
Mhm.
it fat shaming, and
Mhm.
and all these other derogatory terms,
Mhm.
as I call it, that has nothing to do it has nothing to do with that condition at all,
Or
or
yeah, it has nothing
at
to do with
all.
what's actually going on. And again, another example of how social media and a lot of these different mediums are inflating and creating problems where there don't need to be any, right?
Right.
Even when you were talking.
It's almost kind of like I mean, I think one somebody made a comment on social media a while back saying, where did you get your degree from? From Facebook? So now we have a lot of Facebook lawyers, a lot of
Yeah.
Facebook doctors, and all that
Uh-huh.
stuff. I mean, everybody all of a sudden is an expert,
Uh-huh.
or that term that I really really hate. It starts with a G, guru. I hate that word.
Uh-huh.
I hate that word with a passion. They need
Mhm.
2023. Leave that word behind, please,
Yeah.
and stop using the suffix phobia for every situation.
Yeah.
Stop that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's another example of the
Mm.
way in which social media can be creating and or perpetuating something that's negative or problematic for a lot of us, right? In the same way, social media can set us up to have, an unrealistic body image and have a negative body image and have self-esteem issues, right? These are all things that can come from social media that are hugely problematic to our self-worth and our self-esteem.
But this is nothing new though.
Yeah,
This has
exactly. It's
happened long
just more
before
widespread.
we had this before long before social media came around.
Yeah, it's just social media has just made it more widespread, that's all.
Yes, we dealt with it in Hollywood, and everybody's
Mhm.
trying to mimic their favorite celebrity per se.
Mhm.
And it's real because they're saying that is Hollywood that's supposed to have set the standard of how a woman is supposed to look. I totally disagree
Mhm.
with that.
Yep. No, you're correct.
Mm.
It existed in so many different formats.
But
Um,
you don't hear about that. You don't hear about that on social media. As a matter of fact, if you say something along those lines on Facebook or Instagram, they'll block
yep.
you and put you in Facebook jail,
Uh-huh.
without even given this whole situation its proper, context. It's kind of like, oh, I'm doing this to spare your feelings.
Right.
We
Wait,
gotta get out of that.
yeah, which again is why it comes back, just like you said, to education.
Mhm.
And the more everybody can educate themselves, the less of an issue these things become.
And I would have been at a disservice if I didn't mention that, because I'm quite sure that you being in the health and wellness
Hmm.
field, that you
Hmm.
probably have run across this
Oh yeah, of course.
quite often.
Absolutely.
And it really is more than the obesity that they're dealing with. It
Hmm.
also the package also comes with self-sabotage, low
Uh-huh.
self-esteem,
Oh, amen to that for sure.
um, the whole nine yards, which is why I really don't like to comment on those things, because first of all, I have little to none knowledge of any of this. in terms of health wellness
Uh-huh.
is concerned. So there's no reason for me to, to respond to any of that except just to be a listening ear and a crying shoulder.
Mhm.
That's the extent that I can go to. But on both sides of the aisle, in my opinion, that both ends of the aisle definitely need professional help. Those who are making those outlandish claims without the proper context, they need professional help too.
Sure. Well, I'm a little biased, but I always say I think the world would be an immensely better place if every one of us on the planet was in therapy in some form or another. So I completely agree with that. I think everybody can benefit.
Well, that's another conversation for another day because you and I both know that when it comes to counseling and therapy and psychiatry and psychology, it's not cheap,
Yes, agreed.
and that's a whole nother conversation that need to be had. So,
Hmm.
but you're not going to hear this from mainstream media. You not, and
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time that there have ever been any type of investigative reporting on stuff like this, as well as the weight loss
Hmm.
dieting industry,
Hmm.
as you may call it.
Hmm.
Never hearing. So having you on here is like really a treat.
Oh, well, that's
I think
wonderful.
people
Thank
really
you.
need to. I think people really need to hear the truth about those things, which
Hmm.
comes to my next question.
Oh, good. What's that?
So you mentioned something about stigmas.
Uh-huh.
Let's hear some of the stigmas that's associated with the health and wellness industry, and I also want to hear some of the myths. And if you
Um,
can, uh, let's debunk those myths.
all right, that's good. I mean, I think, from a stigma, especially in the medical world, I think the biggest issue is that, this message that weight loss solves every problem. And, the reality is that weight loss can solve some problems, but it's not a magic bullet from a health standpoint. It's not a magic bullet from a mental health standpoint. And it's a process, it's a tool, it can do great things, but it's not the only thing. And, you can lose weight and still not get your needs met or still not achieve what you want to do, what you want to achieve. You cannot lose weight and be healthier and make positive changes in your life. And it's not all or nothing in either respect. And, I hear a lot from my clients, that they go to the doctor and they say, this is a problem or this is a problem. And all their doctor has to say is, oh, well, just lose weight and that will solve the problem. And they don't look into it any further than that. And that stigma to me is hugely problematic because it's almost never that simple. We can say that losing weight helps, but we don't know that that's the one and only thing that helps, particularly situation to situation. And I think it's so important in the medical community that people start paying more attention to the details and looking below the surface at what else is going on and what other factors are contributing. So that's something that I see a lot that's hugely problematic in my opinion.
And going along with that, we're also have been seeing it historically in our TV commercial. Remember
Hmm.
the catchy tab soft drink song?
I don't think I do.
Oh, really? I mean, I
Yeah.
remember that. I remember that when I was I remember that when I was, when I was a kid, and, at the end of the commercial, the glass, the glass that the drink was poured on,
Uh-huh.
um, it shrinks to represent what society thinks a woman's body should look.
Ah, yep.
That's an example. Another example was all these diet capsules that came out
Oh,
in the
sure.
80s,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
Dexatran, for example.
Yep, yep.
Let me see what else. And uh, you always see women with a thin figure on a lot of these commercials.
Mm-hmm.
That is still going on
Yep,
today.
yep.
With,
Well, and
except
then, yeah, and the idea being, thin equals happy. And, if you just lose weight, you'll be happy. But, you know, again, this doesn't address the myriad of mental health concerns that may be going on. And, looking at somebody's issues, somebody's self-sabotage, somebody's concerns, somebody's goals, right? What may be standing in their way, their fears, right? Their insecurities. All of these things don't change with weight loss or weight gain, right? They're still there, and they're things that we need to look at and work through.
So if you're putting someone through a weight management program,
Hmm.
is there like a is there like do they have to see like a counselor or a therapist while they're doing that?
Well, I am the therapist, so if they're doing it with me, they're already seeing me and doing it that way. I don't know if with other weight management plans what they do or what they require, but again, my very biased perspective, I think it's the most beneficial way to do it because you're looking at every aspect of things. You're working at things physically, behaviorally, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, right? Spiritually, even. You're looking at every aspect of yourself and really moving yourself forward in a way that meets all your needs and helps you process through whatever obstacles or barriers are in your way. So I find, that looking at weight management from a much more holistic and psychological perspective is the most beneficial way to do it.
I definitely agree with you on that it has to be a holistic approach. Not
Hmm.
sure how others conduct their practice, but I think it should be a holistic
Hmm.
approach. If the doctor is not trained in those certain areas, then I think there should be like a team of people that work with
Hmm.
the doctor
That would be
in order
great.
to
Yes.
have that holistic. Uh, I'm gonna call it a weight management program, not a
Hmm.
weight loss
Hmm.
program.
Hmm. Agreed.
Because those are two different things. When you talk about
Hmm.
weight loss, thing that comes to mind is, oh, you got to lose weight, but weight
Hmm.
management,
Hmm.
says that, I got to lose some weight, but I need some techniques on how to keep it off. And that's what the
Exactly.
management part.
Exactly.
So, and for those of you who like to use that term weight loss, this is 2023. You need to throw that word out too.
Yeah.
Um, so who are your ideal clients? I see that you are a licensed clinical psychologist, certified
Hmm.
nutrition coach, certified weight management specialist, certified expert life coach, certified personal trainer, certified insomnia treatment clinician. That's a lot of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I cover a lot of stuff. I do a lot of stuff. Well, I mean, in my work and my development and my education, right? Anytime I stumble across anything that I think is, an important tool to include in this equation, I want to learn as much as I possibly can about it and, be as well-rounded in my treatment approach as I possibly can. And that's why I kind of have continued to pursue my education in all of these areas. Um, but my ideal client, like we talked about, really is the chronic yo-yo dieter in the sense that it's somebody who has been dieting and is fed up and, wants to just be done with it, but doesn't really know what else to do about it. I mean, the people that I work with are not people that need, basic education in nutrition. They know that an apple is healthier than a cookie, but the idea is, okay, if I know that, why am I still choosing the cookie in every situation? And what can I do to look at what's driving me to do that and to change some of my behaviors or understand the cause behind my behaviors? So it's the people that really want help in doing things a different way, and in a way like you just talked about, that's not short term, right? In a way that's long term, that's really focused on the long term sustainability and the maintenance kind of management portion of this, which is not a temporary fix. It's not something you're trying on, it's something that you're doing for life.
Now, I'm happy to say that I have done a really good job and disciplined myself not to eat sweets all the time.
Uh-huh.
I can walk into a grocery store right now and be in the midst of all these cookies, cakes, and pies, and it does not bother.
That's great.
I don't know how I did it.
I
And it's
was
certainly,
gonna say, I don't even know that I could do that all the time.
and it's I mean, don't get me wrong, I eat them every now and then, but it's through heavy moderation. But
Uh-huh,
again, I can
good.
walk into a grocery store and be surrounded by all these sweets, and it does not bother.
That's wonderful. You know, when we talk about things like grocery shopping, there's a lot of ways to approach that because everybody's different, right? The fact that you're
Mhm.
able to do that is fantastic, but not everybody is. And, sometimes it makes a difference, if we're going grocery shopping, when we ate last or what we ate last, or if we're shopping from a list or what grocery store we're going to, or how we're approaching the process of grocery shopping. And there are all sorts of little kind of tweaks and changes we can make to the way we do things like grocery shopping that can have a beneficial impact on us as well. So that's even another example of, a normal behavioral pattern that a lot of people don't really think much about, that we can look at and make some minor changes to that have, a very significant impact.
Yeah, I heard this phrase before. It says, "Don't go to the grocery store hungry."
Hungry. Yep. Yep,
I
because
heard that one.
everything looks so much better when we're hungry, right? We're
Mhm.
much more prone to give into temptation. We're much more impacted by things. We tend to feel like we have less willpower. If we're low energy because we're needing food, our brain says we need energy, so it asks for carbs. And processed carbs are the things that give our body energy the fastest. So those are the things that our brain looks at and says, gimme, gimme, gimme. So grocery shopping after eating as opposed to before eating can make a huge difference. And the same way grocery shopping from a list can make a huge difference. If we go to the store with a list, we're also a lot more likely to stick to that list than if we go to the grocery store and we're just kind of perusing everything down the aisles. Then again, we're much more subject to temptation.
Right. I kind of have pretty much in my head when I go to the
Uh-huh.
grocery store. I know what I want without writing it down.
Uh-huh. That's good.
Now, is it some like the example that I gave to where it doesn't bother me and I go to a grocery store and I'm in the midst of all these sweets? Is it something that is this something that your brain can be trained on?
It is, yes.
Mm.
Again, a lot of this comes down to our relationship with food. So I was talking earlier about, individuals that are on a diet and, maybe that diet restricts sugar and they're just not allowed to eat any sugar at all on that diet. So what happens for those people is they see sugary things and they are significantly more tempted to eat them than somebody who doesn't have that restriction in their lives.
Right.
So the
And they
impact of
often feel
restriction,
miserable.
yeah, Yeah, that impact of restriction for people who don't have balance and don't have moderation in their life, they can be much, much, much more tempted by those types of foods than somebody that generally allows themselves to eat that. So, looking at that person as an example and talking about how to train them to shop differently, if they were to start allowing foods like that back into their life in moderation, they remove and really swap out the power that that food has over them, and grocery shopping doesn't become such an issue in that way anymore. So there are definitely things that you can do, but it's really about looking at the whys, right? Looking at why these things may be problematic for you and what you can do to address the root cause as opposed to the specific behavior.
Okay, so let's talk about these two phrases, relationship with food and food having power over you.
Mhm.
What do those two phrases mean? Kind of
Well,
break it down for us.
our relationship with food, right? Human beings have a very complicated relationship with food because of all of the different roles food plays in our life, right? At its core, food is meant to be sustenance, it's meant to be energy, it's meant to be our fuel, but we all grow up using it in so many other ways and not looking at that, right? We grow up with food being social. We grow up with food being celebratory. We grow up with food being emotional. We grow up with food being a way we earn rewards, right? And food gets very tightly connected to things like memories. And then we use it to create comfort. And for a lot of us, food is always accessible. So it becomes easy to use for distraction and avoidance. We learn how to use it for self-soothing and emotional withdrawal. And then there's the whole diet world impact, right? How we're focused on the need to be a certain size or restrict certain foods or count calories. And the more we focus on this, the more our relationship with food gets impaired. And this all starts at a very young age. And so most of us develop this kind of distorted, unhealthy relationship with food at a very young age. And it's something we don't really look at. And, it becomes hugely problematic. And the diet aspect of it, like I was talking about, and food having power really comes from this idea of restriction, right? And like I say, when we restrict something completely, we give it absolute power over us. And if we say, I can never have pizza again, pizza becomes this incredibly powerful force in my universe. And I might say, I can't eat pizza, I can't eat pizza, I can't eat pizza. And then if I'm ever alone with pizza, what's going to happen is I'm not just going to have a slice of pizza, I'm going to eat all the pizza because I've created this restriction around pizza and I've made it insanely powerful in my life. And again, going back to the idea of moderation, if we allow these foods into our life in moderation and remove that restriction, we take so much of the power away from them.
So going back to my example to where I can walk to a grocery store and the all the sweets does not bother me.
Mhm.
You say that I have put a restriction on myself, or
I would say the opposite. I would say, that's the effect of somebody who's not operating from a restriction mindset. Because those foods are not overpowering you. They're not calling to you. They're not saying, "Hey, this is off limits. You're not allowed to have me. So don't you want me?" It's the impact of not being restricted, of allowing for balance and moderation, which sounds like what you're doing.
oh my goodness, I mean, that would be like a that would be like a bad hallucination, right there when I'm on this I'm on a date and I know that what I want to do is wrong, and my date may be like, don't you want I know you want me. I mean, that's what that reminds
Uh-huh.
me of, that
Uh-huh.
having this love affair with food is kind of like being in this being in a love triangle or something. I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
I cannot believe, how much emotion is attached to that. I just cannot.
So much, right? And it starts at such an early age.
So, and I understand that, kids probably go through this sort of thing different than an adult does. Because I remember back in the day, uh, it's Saturday morning, your parents have work all week, they kind of like sleep till noon, and you got you got this TV in front of you, maybe about 3 or 4 channels, and you got loads of Saturday morning programs. So what do?
Mhm.
You don't want to wake up your parents and say, "Hey, cook me some bacon and eggs," right?
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
what do? You go on the top shelf and on the refrigerator, and you get a bowl or two of King Vitamin,
Cereal. Uh-huh.
or some type of sugary
Uh-huh.
cereal.
Uh-huh.
And companies, they know that kids are into that sugary cereal type stuff. So what do, they
Oh
have a
yeah.
whole bunch of commercials,
Yep.
for cereal.
Yep.
I mean, it's so many I remember from my childhood. I'm not going to even go there.
Well, and
and,
that's
and
a
we
factor.
we actually fell in love with eating those cereals because of,
Yeah.
number one, they say, well, if you drink it with juice or toast, you get like 9 essential vitamins and minerals. First, we don't have to wake up our parents and say, "Hey, cook me a big breakfast, sausage, eggs, and toast." Right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, it's an association that we build at a very early age, in the same way we build an association with food as a reward at a very early age, right? We do something well, and our parents take us out for ice cream, or we if we clear our plates, that's the only way we're allowed to get dessert. So even if we're not hungry, we're supposed to eat everything, which is teaching us at a very early age not to pay attention to our body and the intuitive nature of eating, and to not listen to our hunger and fullness cues, but that we're just supposed to clean our plate in order to get dessert, because dessert is a reward. And right, we get all of these messages so early on in our development that we all end up having this emotional relationship with food, which becomes problematic as we get older.
And then at school, like for example, the teachers, okay, y'all get good grades, pizza party.
Uh-huh. Another way we use food as celebration and food as reward, right? And it's not, we're not celebrating with broccoli, right? We're celebrating with pizza or cake or ice cream, or
I
all of these
mean,
things that we put.
as a kid, who wants to eat broccoli or Brussels
Uh-huh.
sprouts? Ugh, I don't even like Brussels sprouts. And I'm an adult now. I don't like eating Brussels sprouts. So what
Uh-huh.
makes you think of, and I'm quite sure, I don't know if you've done this, I don't know if you've done this before, but in my time, kids had a unique way of hiding their vegetables if they don't eat it.
Oh yeah.
Like, sometimes you'll make your
Very
dog,
sneaky.
yeah, sometimes you'll make your dog eat it, or you do all sorts of crazy things, and then your parents, sit there with you at the table and they stare you down. Okay, you better eat your leafy green vegetable,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
again, that even the way we would, force kids to eat certain things is another way we develop a very unhealthy relationship with those foods, right? I mean, we're forced to eat them. It's almost the opposite of what we're seeing with the restriction impact. And so we develop this aversion to those foods as a result of that. So it's just another example of the way in which our relationship with food gets distorted at a very early age.
and what happens if, say that you have a child that's going through that, and if that's not being taken care of while they are children, you think it's going to get worse when they become adults if it's not resolved during childhood.
I mean, I see it getting worse with most people, because it's so ingrained in us at such an early age. And, you can't stop food, right? We're required to have food. And, we have these very, very early messages of food being emotional, food not just being sustenance or energy. And these are associations that we develop at a very early age that stay with us. And it becomes a lot of work to break that when we look at food emotionally, when we turn to food for emotional reasons, right? It becomes habitual. It's something we don't even think about. It's something we just do. And so we really need to look at it and question it and work at changing it if we want that relationship to get healthier.
So is there like a balance, between everything we talk about? I know that in a boyfriend girlfriend relationship, in marriage, there, or even friendship, they're like boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we talk about having this relationship with food,
Mm-hmm.
should we have boundaries?
Yes, in some respect. I mean, we always go to this idea of 80-20 instead of all or nothing, but the numbers themselves are a little bit arbitrary. What we're talking about is the idea of moderation, right? Again, I can't have pizza ever, so all I want is pizza. But if I have pizza every Wednesday night, and every Wednesday night I say I'm allowed to have two slices of pizza, and I'm going to enjoy them mindfully. I'm going to savor them. I'm going to truly appreciate them. And when I'm done, I know that I get to have it again next week. So I feel okay about it. And that's an example of a boundary that's moderate, that takes that power away from pizza, that takes the restriction away from pizza, and allows somebody to have a healthier relationship with it. But those boundaries are all specific to the individual. So everybody kind of needs to look at their own issues and where they struggle to determine what boundaries are going to be most appropriate for them. And, it,
Now, what
it may often not be a boundary with food per se. It may be about looking at how we use food. So if we use food emotionally, for example, let's say we eat when we're stressed, or we eat when we're bored, or we eat when we're sad, then what we really need to look at is that behavior, that emotion that is driving us to eat, and find another way, a healthier, more adaptive way to respond to that emotion, which is not a boundary around food per se, but really about creating a new habit to respond to emotion. So really it's about looking at what our particular behaviors are to determine what we need to do about it.
now what if I have like a strange addiction or something like uh this show don't come on anymore. It used to come on cable called My Strange Addiction. And I
Mm-hmm.
caught myself watching it one time, and there was a young lady that was addicted to French fries.
Mm-hmm. I
Any
mean,
correlation to what we've been talking about?
possibly, I don't know that show. So I don't know what the situation was. I don't know if it was something where the individual had a history of restriction around French fries and then finally decided this was the only thing they were going to eat. I don't know if it was distraction. I don't know if it was avoidance. I don't know if it was emotional, but there's a lot of behavioral reasons that can, lead into that. So it's going to be specific again to the situation and the person.
I'm quite sure that those episodes are on YouTube. So
Oh, I'll have to
if
check it
you,
out. Uh,
yeah, everything is on YouTube these days.
yes, of course.
Uh, before we move on, just want to for the audience to get a hold of some of Dr. Seti's accolades. So, in addition to all these different hats that she wears, she is also a feature contributor to numerous blogs, including MyFitnessPal, Activity, and Beachbody. They have a lot of infomercials and has appeared. Yeah, they do. And has appeared on Fox 32, Chicago is a WFLD for if y'all into call letters. Las, Las Vegas Morning Blend, CBS 8 Morning Show, whatever city that's in. I have no idea.
That's San Diego.
San Diego, okay. NBC Palm Springs and Fox Austin.
Yeah.
She appeared on a lot of TV programs here. I see that you've been a contributor to numerous of blogs. Three of the most popular ones I just read. I think they had their own product lines. I seen infomercials from them from time to time.
Mhm.
So now we're going to switch gears and talk about your two books. First one is Shatter the Yo-Yo, and then the second
Mhm.
one is the Self-Sabotage Behavior Workbook.
Correct. And Shatter the Yo-Yo is, like we talked about, it's about, breaking dependence on yo-yo dieting while learning how to manage your weight long term. And, Shatter the Yo-Yo is a reference to kind of ending the yo-yo dieting cycles. And so the book itself, kind of walks you through the process of understanding what's been going on and learning what and how you can do things differently to, create, sustainable behavioral change while breaking your dependence on diets.
And how long you had your private practice?
I've been in private practice for a long time, over 15 years.
So I see you have a lot of certifications. Is that instituted by the state that you're in?
No, not at all. As a licensed as a clinical psychologist to be licensed, there's a whole bunch you have to go through for that, but that's the only one that's required. The rest are all things that I pursued on my own, just in the interest of furthering my own education and kind of developing, a more sound, well-rounded approach to the way in which I work with my clients.
So are all these other the certifications that you have, are they easy to attain?
I don't think I'd use the word easy. Some of them are pretty in depth in terms of the kind of educational component to it, and require a lot of hours of study. So I've definitely put a lot of time and effort into furthering my education and attaining a lot of these certifications.
You would not believe this, but I am what you call a certified counseling practitioner
Uh-huh.
and certified professional life coach.
Uh-huh.
I attained both of those certifications back in 2019, but
Oh, that's great.
I have not yet pursue any type of private practice yet because I'm doing other things and
Uh-huh.
um, I'm kind of waiting to the right time to do that because it's a competitive field. So
Sure. Sure.
it's a competitive
Understand.
field, and right now, right now, people prefer someone in any type of mental health field who is able to uh, take insurance, and
Right, of course.
we all know that that's a strenuous process. It has its negatives and it has its positives. Well, you have some who say, well, we're not going to deal with that because of all of the headache, and sometimes it can get misused and abused as well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it really depends on the person.
Right.
And you have done a lot of speaking engagements as well.
Mm-hmm.
So who are your target audience?
Same thing. I speak a lot at conferences, for people who are either focused on health and wellness or weight management, or I speak to people who work in that field, whether they be nutrition coaches or personal trainers or people who are working with those people and kind of helping giving them background. So in a lot of respects, it's the same type of population, just a little more extended and wider reach.
Okay, some great information here, and we roughly got about 5 minutes before we shut this down. Certainly appreciate you coming on here.
Oh, of course.
So moving right along, what do you mean about self-sabotage?
Well, in terms of what self-sabotage is, when we talk about self-sabotage, my very simplistic definition of it for people is simply standing in your own way or, having a goal and engaging in behaviors that stand in your way of achieving it. And it's like the idea of, I want a job but I'm not going to apply for it, or I want a relationship but I'm not going to put myself out there for dating, or I want to achieve weight loss and weight management but I constantly use the I'll start tomorrow thinking, right? These are all different forms of self-sabotage. And I had, my first book was in the weight loss realm, and that was a lot of what I worked with. And everyone always asks me how I kind of meandered into the self-sabotage world, but almost everyone that struggles to maintain their weight doesn't struggle because they don't know what it looks like to be healthy. They struggle because they self-sabotage. So my focus on weight management really has just been a specific application of addressing self-sabotage. And with all of my weight management clients, we end up addressing self-sabotage in so many areas of their life as well. So it was something that I just naturally started focusing on, which is where the book came from, the Self-Sabotage Behavior Workbook, where I really just wanted to provide people with a way to create self-improvement for themselves. And so the Self-Sabotage Behavior Workbook is really just a guidebook for people who want to improve in their health and wellness, their relationships, their careers, their finances, and understand how their own personal self-sabotage may be impeding that goal, and what they can do to address it and finally start moving forward and achieving what they want to achieve. So that's what that's really about.
So is that common like at the beginning of the
Mhm.
year when we talk about New Year's resolution? I mean, it's not a day go by ever since I've been living, to hear, January 1st, New Year resolutions, everybody talk about I'm going to lose weight, and then you find out maybe a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months, either they don't do it or they start it and they stop.
Uh-huh.
Would that be a form of self-sabotage?
It can be. I mean, the starting and stopping is not as much of the self-sabotage as the lofty goals tend to be a form of self-sabotage. A lot of times we approach New Year's resolutions saying, I'm going to do everything in the world and I'm going to do everything 100% different. And it's impossible, right? We're setting ourselves up for failure from the get-go by establishing these goals for ourselves that are really unachievable. And the idea of addressing that self-sabotage would be looking at that and saying, okay, how can I augment this to make this something that I actually can succeed at? And maybe it's something that I create a baby step plan for, or maybe it's something that I have to do piecemeal, where I start with one thing and build up that skill and then add on and do another thing, as opposed to saying, I'm going to do everything all at once until I get overwhelmed and I stop doing all of it. Right. So breaking that all or nothing thinking that's so, ingrained in the idea of self-sabotage. So it's a form of it, absolutely.
Yes, okay, I get it. I fully understand. So with that, on the flip side of the coin, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm gonna lose weight this year, and then you like procrastinate, and then days go by, weeks go by,
Hmm.
months go by, and you haven't started anything. And I'm
Yep.
like, oh well, I'll just do it next year.
Yep. Well, and even procrastination is a form of self-sabotage, right?
Yeah,
I
I think
talk
we all
about,
been there.
yep, yep, like the constant putting things off, waiting till the last minute, right? This, behavior sets people up to believe that they can only achieve by putting things off. And ultimately that thought becomes self-sabotaging in and of itself.
Now, when you go to these conferences and workshops, I'm sure you do you hand out materials? Do you have like a packet of materials? Do you give out your book or people
I
have an opportunity to purchase your book? So
All of the
walk
above.
me through walk me through one of your conferences. What can I
I offer all of the above. Generally, I usually have my books available there. I usually have, flyers and handouts and things like that, especially if it's focused on a specific topic. I may have handouts that are specific to that. Generally, I direct people towards my website because it's the best place to get information. And I have a bunch of free guidebooks on my website. I have a ton of like very, useful blog posts for people who are looking to get information in a specific area. So I usually will tell people to go to my website to get the information that they need.
Okay, we are getting ready to wrap up here, Dr. Setting. Uh, what is the best ways that people can contact you? Maybe they want to partake some of the services you offer, or maybe they want you to speak at their next event.
The best place is definitely my website, meonlybetter.com. And there's a contact us page there that, will shoot an email directly to me. So that's the best place. There's also a freebies page on there where people can download all of my free guides or whatever guides are of interest to you. And then, as I mentioned, there's also a blog page there where you can get all sorts of hopefully useful information.
Okay, and one last thing before you go. It's
Sure.
been a tradition here at the Australia broadcast section to where we offer the guests a chance to say any last words. So, what
Um,
are your last words?
well, what I tend to say in some respect to everybody in some version is whatever you want to achieve, not only are you capable of doing it, but you are worth it. And I see it all the time where people's self-worth is what's standing in their way. And whatever you may think, you are worth it.
Sounds profound. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Candice Seti does show us some love today. Thank you so much for being part of the show today. And this would be, of course, made available on all social media platforms, all podcasting platforms, including Facebook and YouTube. And that should be out sometime this week. And we're going to close here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Some great information. Hope you go back in the archives and listen to it. And hopefully you'll be getting some calls or emails or some communication or here. Just really happy to help you out and put yourself out there. So this is The Works. I'm Keith Williams, your host. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.